very hard not to follow your legs sometimes because they want to ride a race. And Decker's been immensely strong today. Well, there it is, 1 minute 20 confirmed. And we're back to the group, and so too is Michele Bartoli on the tail.
Well, Michele Bartoli won't do too much work right now. He's on the tail there of Johan Museo. Museo, a canny bike rider. He will allow the younger riders in this group now to set most of the pacemaking at the front, because if it all comes back together, he's probably got still a few cards up his sleeve with the thought of how to try and get round them in the finish. In front of him, Serge Baguet. Interesting to see Baguet riding so close to the front, Phil, because Baguet, a former rider of Lotto's, actually retired from the sport for a couple of years and now is on the way back.
Yes, it's hard to shake it out your system, I have to say, and we both speak from experience with that. Here we go, another small climb now. This is a climb that might hurt, as Armstrong now takes second wheel on Decker.
This is the last climb of the day right now, and if Armstrong's got anything left in those legs, he's going to try and launch an attack on Decker. But he actually doesn't look quite as fluid as he did just a little bit earlier on. The face of concentration doesn't give anything away on Armstrong at all, but he's moving up to show that he's still in the group, where in the meantime, Eddie Mazzolini still surviving. He's at the bottom of the climb that those two riders are still on.
So I estimate he is about 30 seconds ahead of the chase group, and then the difference behind the two leaders. Second time up the climb here.
This is the Gulgamerberg. This is the chasing group just behind, and they are not very far behind Eddie Mazzolini at all, maybe only around about 20 seconds as well. So Mazzolini's still caught in no man's land. This is a real stomper of a ride that he's put in this afternoon.
I think Eddie is just up the road there in amongst the cars. I can't quite see him, but the police outriders are there. Sitting at the back, Michael Bogarts can claim a free ride right now with Decker up front, but I bet he's hoping Decker gets caught.
Well, he looks good. His legs are still very supple. He's keeping the gears right down there at the moment, and he's just hoping, I'm absolutely certain, that his teammate will get caught. On the front, Davide Rebellin, as this group of riders now is on the Gulgamerberg, and is Johan Museo going to try and split them apart?
Well, he's having a great Amstel Gold Race, Museo. He would normally be following wheels on these climbs. Instead, here he is, setting the pace. Sometimes when you're tired, Paul, that's the best thing to do if you can.
Yeah, well, look at the technique there of Michele Bartoli. He was in difficulty on the last climb, and he's actually moved up to third or fourth place there, just in case there is any acceleration. And if there is, he can slip back and still hopefully stay on the tail of the group over the summit of the climb.
Well, 1 minute and 20 seconds since Decker and Armstrong stormed up the pass. These riders here now are having to do something about it. At this minute in time, they can't be gaining at all. Zeberg is setting the pace. There's no poor old Michele Bartoli forced out into the front again with Rebellin on his wheel. Van Petegem is going through as well. Chris Piers is the rider sitting at the back for the Cofidis team, again representing this French team in a big classic, right in the thick of the action.
Well, nobody really setting up a serious pace up this climb. Davide Rebellin is going to have a little attack if he can and try and leap off the front right now. But everybody, you see, right now there's nobody actually organising the chase. But when somebody attacks, everybody responds to it. That is going to give a big advantage to the Decker-Armstrong group in front, because the pace is going up and the discussion goes on.
Now, this is Theo de Roy, an ex-bike rider, and clearly it's not a friendly discussion.
He's actually saying there, you can't ride with Armstrong because we've got 3 men in the group behind. We're in a tactical position to win this bike race. 10 kilometers to go, and this is the longest, hardest I've seen a team manager come up alongside and try and get his rider to stop. But Decker is not going to go with it, I don't think.
He's working through as well as argue here, and poor old Lance is taking no notice. He's just doing his job as a professional bike rider, wondering what on earth is Theo de Roy doing here. Well, Decker may as well tell de Roy to go and ride behind now, because he's going to take no notice of him. And Eddie Mazzolini there. Now he's having a chat with Armstrong here.
Well, Armstrong is a pretty tough bike rider, and he says, well, I know the team manager's giving you those orders. That's going to be up to you. And I think if they're going to be real, true champions, they'll both ride together up to the finish line and then try and sprint it out. Decker's having a bit of a laugh there, I think, because of the fact Lance Armstrong probably knows he's been given a serious amount of dirt from his team manager.
Well, one thing's for sure, these two guys are going to take it down to the line and they get half a shot now. And, oh, and there's a puncture here for Van Petegem. That's rather sad. And again, the bad luck of the Mercury Viatel this season continues. Is Petegem now going to have to chase back? He should get back. The convoy's still going by. And he's still on the telephone there by the look of it to Theo de Roy. You saw him squeeze his chest. That's where his speaker is. As we take another look at the restart here. No, the flat tyre arrival of Van Petegem before the restart.
You see that sign there very quick. He just put his hand out in front there to indicate to John Warden in the team car there that in fact it was a front wheel puncture. As a real pro, he was off the machine and had the front wheel out almost before the mechanic got there. That speeds up the process and allows him to change his front wheel in usually well under 10 seconds. Mazzolini's third on the road at the moment.
This man has had a lonely ride, but he's made a real splendid race of it today. And so too have these two riders. And the saga continues up here because Theo de Roy has come back. I hope that number 13 is lucky for Eric Decker today. He's a magnificent bike rider. He's opted not to sit on Lance Armstrong, despite the fact he's got 3 men coming up behind. He's going away with the most dangerous man, twice winner of the Tour de France, but he doesn't feel as though he can sit on, and hats off for that.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on Rabobank to win this bike race, though, Phil. That is why Theo de Roy has been up here so many times. This is Holland. Rabobank is the #1 team of Holland, and they certainly want to win. Theo de Roy obviously feels they're in a much better tactical position in the group behind because, yes, they do have 3 riders, but at the moment he's got a 50-50 chance of winning. Armstrong and Decker sprinting it out. I wouldn't want to put my money on either of them because Armstrong...
And welcome to the Amstel Gold Race, Holland's only classic. This the 40th edition, based in Maastricht and over a distance of 254.6 kilometres. Round 5 and the last round of the World Cup Series before we go into the big tours. And Freddie Rodriguez, the champion of the United States, in this move here on the left of our picture.
George Hincapie in this group as well, Phil, on the right-hand side there. Carsten Kroon is the Rabobank rider. It's not necessarily the right combination, I don't think, at the moment, because for the Rabobank boys, they will certainly be betting everything on Michael Bogard, already a winner of this race a couple of years ago. Hincapie in here, Ortenzi, Paolo Paolini, Petito, Roberto Petito, Andre Schmiel. It's amazing to see Schmiel in an early move like this. Carsten Kroon is the rider from Rabobank, and Kessler, the last member there, is the member in here for Team Telecom.
And Paolo Bettini was here, by the way, but he crashed out of it. This breakaway started off after 60 kilometres today. Some 13 of them getting it together. They've had a maximum lead of 8 minutes, but it's beginning to come down now. But it's nice to see George Hincapie still in the thick of the action here. Different role for George today. Paul as winner of Ghent Wevelgem, but of course his man Lance Armstrong is still in the main field, but riding this his only classic of the year so far.
Well, for Georgie Hincapie, you can't let a man like Hincapie get into a breakaway like this on this kind of a course, because he's the kind of man who could win, which is why we didn't see him ride last week Liège-Bastogne-Liège. They've saved him to bring him back to be competitive here. And you can see Rabobank are not too happy with the situation, having only Carsten Kroon in the first group, Phil, because they're putting the hammer down. There at the back of the group is the Dutch national champion, rides for Mercury Viatel this year, and that is Leon van Bon, about 5 or 6 from the rear.
Well, this is the most interesting classic race. People always believe that Holland is a flat country. Nothing could be further from the truth down this corner. 1 minute 54 from the leaders back to the main field. But this is the up and down area which we call Little Switzerland in this part of Holland. Very tough, great area for cycle racing and for cycle touring. And not surprisingly, that the Rabobanks are going to stir up trouble today because they always feel this race is their property.
At the front here is Andre Schmiel of Lotto, trying to accelerate, get a bit more impetus into this leading group of riders, and he seems to actually split 1 or 2 men off the back. You can see once again the weather not great in this part of Europe at the start of the season. And in fact, at the start of the race this morning, because of that foot and mouth disease which is raging throughout Europe, all of the team cars were disinfected, as well as the riders' wheels as well, Phil.
Yes, and in fact, it's really only a 9th-hour decision to say this race could go on at all, but at least it's known and recognised as being important as part of Holland's sporting heritage these days. So they have allowed it to go on, but officials have sprayed all the cars. The farmland has been roped off in places. You're not allowed to step onto the sidewalks, and the riders have been told they must not go into the woods for natural breaks or anything like that.
Number 22 there is Jeroen Blijlevens. He also was earlier in that leading group with his teammate, but he's obviously a little bit allergic to the climbs here around the bottom part of Limburg.
Yeah, the guy going off with him was Glenn de Hollander, and so Lotto losing men there. And this breakaway thinning out rather dramatically now at the front. Looking down there, we've got just 8 riders left. There were 13 of them. And things looking a little bit rough. At 10 degrees Celsius, that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the start today. As you can see, it's been damping occasionally too. The roads are still wet. There is Andre Schmil, and a man perhaps not suited entirely to this classic, but he's certainly a man for the classic races.
Carsten Kroon, the Rabobank rider on the far side, was a man that was made famous to us last year by wearing the King of the Mountains jersey in the Giro d'Italia for an awful long time. In fact, he had a very bad injury and kept riding because he had such a large advantage in that King of the Mountains competition. A very courageous rider. Moving forward, the team manager there of Faso Bortolo coming up to give Ortenzi a little chatting to at the moment, because they are in a reasonably good situation with Francesco Casagrande in the main field behind. But once we come to the more repetitive nature of this year's Amstel Gold Race, the big names will certainly come to the front. In the past, the Amstel Gold Race has actually nipped across into Belgium, and because of that foot and mouth disease, they decided to keep the race totally inside the Dutch borders. It was actually the Belgians that didn't want the incursion, and I think it's actually made it a slightly tougher race, Phil, because we do 2 circuits, which include the Kutenberg, which they go over on 2 occasions.
And we're still to see that climb. Actually, that's a 22% climb, a very steep climb indeed. And there's a lot of US postal riders here being shadowed by Leon Van Bon, the Mercury boy. These are great rivals now as the champion goes through. And Lance Armstrong just caught a glimpse of him over the shoulder there of Leon Van Bon.
Schmil on the front of the group, very nervous. He wants to reduce the size of this group here. Very upset with his race there in the Paris-Roubaix just 2 weeks ago. He was crashed in the first section of cobblestones, had to chase for the whole race, and rode back incredibly, Phil, to finish. I think it was in 8th place at the end of the day. A marvellous comeback from that man, who really is a gutsy rider. At the age of 38, he still doesn't want to give up.
No, absolutely incredible. Just look, Paul, at all of the Rabobank riders, and they're even getting help here from Theo de Roy, the team manager's coming up alongside as well. Pass a few words of advice. Puffing and blowing from the riders here. They've got men in the breakaway, but it's not the men they would want, I would assume.
That was a pretty slick move there, you noticed, by Eric Decker. That's actually an illegal move that he took on board there. Theo de Roy had a small drink just inside the armrest of the car, and being a very slick professional, he grabbed it, and there's no chance at all of the referee seeing that, although we managed to pick it up on television.
And of course we're not telling anybody. As we watch now, the men from Rabobank keep the pace up here. 2, 4, 6, 7 riders left at the front, 8 riders left at the front of the original 13, and they're under pressure. Now, how much pressure are they under? Because this breakaway was 8 minutes up, and it's nothing like that now. What, 40 seconds?
40 seconds or so, and not a really big group behind either. The pressure on the front coming from Rabobank. All of their men are in here. Eric Decker, Michael Bogard. Michael Bogard is #1 for this team today. They will be looking after him absolutely and hoping to put him in an ideal position when we come into the climbs towards the end, because he rode exceptionally well last weekend in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But for the Dutch team, this is the most important day of their year. There are a lot of small races here in Holland, Phil, which these riders shine in after the Tour de France, which is their only World Cup event and the only real major one-day race that they have.
That's right, it really is. You think in the hotbed of cycling in Holland they'd be closing roads every weekend for major races, but in fact the opposite is the truth. This is the only single-day race. They totally close the roads for racing here in Holland, and it's a big one, 254 kilometres. As we race back to Maastricht now, and we've got 62.5 kilometres still to run.
Well, Andre Schmil is pretty nervous. He obviously knows the main field is coming back, and very shortly we'll be hitting a fairly steep climb, so he wants to make sure he gets there early before the main field does, and hopes that a small group will come off in front of the main field and start the ball rolling once again. A big attack by him, and he's lodged 1 or 2 riders off the back at the moment. In fact, Kessler here, the Telecom rider, put into a bit of difficulty, but Georgi Hincapie riding really high on his early Classics performance with that Gonwevelgem win and 4th place in Paris-Roubaix. And it's good to see Freddie Rodriguez riding to the front. We haven't seen an awful lot of Freddie so far this year. He did actually just a couple of days ago get 3rd place in the Grand Prix Pinot Cerami, which is a very good ride by him. And I think this is the kind of climbing race that should suit Freddie Rodriguez, and it's nice to see him at the front.
Yes, he's had a couple of top 3 places this year, and I'm sure he's building up now. He's been a proud wearer of the Championship of the USA jersey. He had 7 wins last year, and the majority of those coming after he picked up his title. So he's looking forward to defending it perhaps in Philadelphia in the month of June this year, as he sits onto the back now. He's got a powerful sprint when he gets a chance to use it, as young Fred. He's now 27.5 years of age.
Another one of the big transfers of the winter season as well, because last year he was a member of the huge Mappe Quick-Step team, and he decided to move across with the Domo Farm Frites Belgian division that split across there, and I think he's made a very good decision to stay with them.
So Fred Rodriguez sitting on the bat, looking quite cool and collected. Had been in the breakaway a long time today. This break settling in after 60 kilometers, 38 miles. And now we're heading up to inside 60 to go. So they've had a long day in the saddle out front. Thinned down rather drastically over the last few miles. And there's still some tough climbs to come, to say the least, as we run down back towards the finish in Maastricht. And again, typical of Holland, these very narrow roads here right down by the Belgian borders, and not just the Belgian borders but the German borders as well, as this breakaway stays out of sight, but the chase is very, very definitely on. And I think Fred is hanging off the back here, knowing that the catch is inevitable now.
Well, these roads are actually not too bad at all, but when the Amstel Gold Race does come through a lot of the towns here in Holland, they are very dangerous indeed, because there's a lot of road furniture, as they call it nowadays, circular roundabouts and directional islands to try and direct the traffic, but it makes it very difficult for the bike riders. This is the Bemellerberg, and it's only 4.5%, but Hincapie's at the front there trying to dislodge one or two riders, and the only thing these guys are doing right now, Phil, is actually delaying the catch, because it's certain to happen quite shortly.
Big George there, possibly thinking of taking Fred's jersey off him in Philadelphia in June as the national champion. George has won that title as well, of course.
He's won that title and been disqualified as well.
Absolutely.
It was unbelievable, the scenario that day when he was awarded the jersey, and it was only at the press conference he was told that he wasn't the legal wearer because he'd been disqualified after the judges had could take into account a complaint that he was paced back into the race after a late puncture.
Which he was, never disputed, but the fact was it was a little bit late to tell him perhaps. 8 riders then still survive down there. Amongst them is Carsten Kroon. I think he's the only Rabobank rider left in this breakaway now. Fred Rodriguez, Paulini is still down there, and Ortenzi, and certainly George Hincapie. Kessler is the man from Telecom setting the pace. And another little climb here, and spring just about bursting, but we're just on into May now, just tickling May, and the weather here still very unseasonal like.
I think you're right about Freddie Rodriguez. He certainly seems to be very often at the back of that group there. The big work here on the same climb now still being done by the Rabobank riders. They're obviously trying to pull it all back together, because they're banking everything, I think, today on one card, and that's a card of Michael Bogert.
Coming to the back, there's the gap. The first time I've had an official check at 55 seconds, so a little bit more than I thought. It looked closer than that. Huge crowds, of course, Holland, but many of the spectators have not been allowed to get to their favourite vantage points because of the restriction of movement in the countryside in Holland, because of the foot and mouth disease, this disease which runs through the hoofed animals in Britain, and it's been reported over here as well, so they're taking no chances.
A quick glimpse at the back of the group there. I saw the man Fernando Escartin looking quite good on the far side there. Gianluca Bortolami, the winner of the Tour of Flanders, somewhat surprise winner of the Tour of Flanders, but since then he rode quite well in Paris-Roubaix, and hoping to ride a little higher in the standings today with the possibility of regaining the lead in the World Cup. But he's going to have to come up against this very strong armada. There are 6 riders from Rabobank here at the front of the main field. The 6th one there, you can see in a red jersey, is Marcus Zuberg, the champion of Switzerland.
Well, clearly the Rabobank boys not too confident in their man Carsten Kroon up there, because they're emanating the chase. Carsten has never won a bike race, but he certainly distinguished himself last year in the Giro d'Italia, because he was an early leader in 3 competitions there, the Intergiro, the Points and King of the Mountains leader. And so he's obviously got good form as well.
Well, they will be happy in the fact, Phil, that they do have at least one man represented in the lead group. They've always taken this as being their pride and joy, their performances here at the Amstel Gold Race. And in fact, their team manager, Jan Raas, won it so many times that at one time it was nicknamed the Amstel Gold Raas.
Yes, absolutely right. There's Andre Smeel, a bit of a shout coming from the group here as they want more speed, more speed. They're still under pressure, but they're still trying to keep this breakaway going. They would really like now a little bit of an injection of strength from the back, but they certainly don't want everybody up there. As we look here now at Paulini sitting on the back, Schmill is just in front of him, and I think it was Hincapie got to the front, was it, Paul?
That's Hincapie on the front right now, leading away on the descent. It's a bit surprising, really, to see Andre Schmill in a lead group like this of non-major contenders for the finish of the Amstel Gold Race, and he may well have been thinking he could surprise all the other guys. What has happened with the race being so difficult so far is we've actually reduced the size of the main field, and when we go back there you can see there are only about 45 riders left in the group, but the big advantage must go over to Rabobank because they've got a lot of men there.
These beautiful Dutch country lanes here as we course through them, and they rise and kick a little bit, and then the steep ones as well. Whoops, up straight to the back comes Kessler. He hasn't been left behind as he makes sure he's staying in the group. There's still one missing, but they've sent away the service car, which to me means the race is now closing in fast.
Well, these riders now are approaching the very repetitive nature of the climbs to come in the southern part of Holland here, just outside of Maastricht. And Georgie Hincapie is still looking absolutely magnificent. He's still got the form that took him to that victory at Gont-Wevelgem. 56.4 kilometers to go to the finishing line, and that should take them around about an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes. They're going through the area here where the feeding station should have been, and I think that is probably an unofficial feeding station because a lot of these teams have a lot of friends and supporters in this part of the world, and they nip out to these small towns and try and slip up a warm cup of tea, especially on days like this.
So this little select group, they've dropped one rider now, and the one rider they've lost is Carsten Kroon we were talking about. So the Rabobank will get really into top gear when they realise they've got nobody up here now. The gap is less than 30 seconds. Big crowds in the towns and little villages surrounding Holland here, and a beautiful clean country it is too. Sun is just peeping through after a chilly start this morning. George Hincapie, used to being in the leading groups in the classics now, had a wonderful build-up to this event, especially with his win in Gent-Wevelgem and the remarkable fourth place he had for a second time in Paris-Roubaix.
These riders looking a bit nervous now, Filky, insistently looking over their shoulders behind to see what movements are happening, and they know once that yellow car gets sent forward, they know that they're pretty close to getting caught because the judges and the referees try to keep the gap between the leading group of riders and the main field as clean as possible. This is the main field, and certainly they will be put under pressure now by Rabobank because of the fact that Carsten Kroon has been dropped from the leading group, and that will not be a situation they will be too happy with at all. But it will be good as we look at the back of the group here. This is another rider from Team Coast. Team Coast is one of the new teams on the block here. Fernando Escartin a little bit further forward there. Team Coast is a team that's looking for selection, and selection should come in around about 10 days time right now, and they've actually opened up their advantage, Phil. The Kop group, which is the Dutch word for the leading group of riders, now 102 ahead of the main field.
Well, I wasn't expecting a reversal there. I thought it was curtains, so you better call in the yellow car again, because it looks as though this group now has found itself some firepower. Andre Schmill never short of some strong legs, always willing to try, and George too. I'm not too sure what George's tactics are here, Paul, because he's really under the command of Lance Armstrong today, isn't he?
Well, Armstrong will want to try himself out. The only reason Lance has come to this race is, first of all, because he loves to race in Holland, and secondly, because it's the first part of his build-up to the Tour de France. He's used this race as a test in the past, and in fact, he finished second to Michael Bogert in a photo finish after the Dutchman sat on his tail for the last 20 or so kilometers. Armstrong would certainly very much like a revenge. Last year, he didn't ride too well here in the Amstel Gold Race, and it was thought that maybe he wasn't in the ideal form building up for his Tour de France. This is Leon van Bon, I think, who's just leapt out of the group here now, trying to surprise his former teammates here. Van Bon, a magnificent bike rider, always aggressive, took out a stage at the Tour de France last year, didn't finish it, but did end up signing through the interseason for the new Mercury Viatel team. There, in fact, you can see 184 is Fernando Escartin. You can always recognize that crab-like position.
And here's a little bit of a move coming here from Van Bon. This is how he did it, taking his place from down the line. That's the perfect place to launch an attack when the domestiques are working hard at the front. But then you've got to keep on and hang on in there. He's got a little bit of a gap at the moment. Nice to see a reaction coming from the race now. They're beginning to run down into the vital 50 kilometers to go here. This is the champion of Holland racing on home territory, and Eric Dekker has caught his tail.
Well, Eric Dekker today wearing the unlucky number 13. There was one Dutchman, in fact, Jerry Kneteman, who would refuse to wear the number 13. He was so superstitious about it, but Eric Decker doesn't seem to have worried about that today. And in fact, the rules in international cycling say that if you don't want to wear number 13, you can actually request a different number.
Well, that sounds fair enough, especially if you are superstitious. Back to George Hincapie at the front here, Paolo Paolini on his inside. Andre Schmil is probably the best accomplished man in this group. Certainly last year he was voted Belgium's top cyclist of the year for his brilliant season yet again, starting with his win in the Tour de Flanders, second in Paris Tours, runner-up in the World Cup. A title, of course, he was defending. He was the World Cup holder back in '99.
Almost taking out victory in the World Championships because he attacked so many times over the last 5 kilometers there. He deserved to win that championships, and what a story that would have been. This is Motorbike 1 and Motorbike 2 on the right. You can see now Eric Decker and Leon van Bon trying to get across there. They've been joined here by one of the riders from Lotto, and that may well be one of the riders like Mario Arts trying to get across right now.
Well, we'll try and get an idea on him when we can, but he's certainly got there at the moment. And if it is, no, that's Serge Baguet, Paul, who's just latched on. And so Baguet is the rider from Lotto. They're the chasing group, but it doesn't matter anymore. It's academic. There's a few more caught up again. Now we're back in the main field here. But counterattacks like this are surely going to shut down that breakaway.
These guys are hammering to get out of the front now. The Dutchmen really have the advantage, having placed Eric Decker in the counter-attack. It's also good for Mercury Viatel to have that man Leon van Bon in the group too. But they have a pretty hard ride to get across to the leading group of 5 right now. 51 kilometers to go to the finish, and there's still an awful lot of climbing to do.
And seemingly not too many people around. They're certainly not in the countryside because they're all more or less banned from it because of this problem with the cattle disease. So they have been told to stay in the villages as the race continues to course its way around this south corner of Holland.
This attack, counter-attack here coming from Marcus Seberg. Here is Michele Bartoli trying to come out of the front of the main field too. And now we see a situation where Rabobank are on the defensive because they're pretty happy with the position of Eric Decker off the front. Looks like Bortolami coming forward there. And that, in fact, is Lance Armstrong in second position right now. The first time we've seen him moving to the front of the pack.
Just on 50 kilometers left to go, and the American winner for the last 2 years of the Tour de France has hit the front here, giving himself a perfect workout. Nice bit of speed work, flicks his arm, calls through Gianluca Bortolami, winner so well this year of the Tour de Flanders, got himself the lead in the World Cup competition. That's gone now to Roman Weinsteins after his great ride in Paris-Roubaix.
Bortolami not getting any help here. You see Rabobank are very clever in the tactics they adopt, but Michele Bartoli's not too happy about it. He's going to leap straight out of the group. This is where he gets his nickname from, Il Gatto, the cat, because he likes to pounce just at the right minute. He was trying to pounce on the back end of the motorbike there. Many of these riders try and use the television motorbike as a launch pad to attack. They try and catch the driver unawares, and then the guy is maybe in the wrong gear and tries to accelerate. He accelerates slowly with his motorbike, but the rider will get just a little bit of a pull and then catapult himself off the front of the main field.
And so the riders now still counter-attacking every move here. That's Van Bon again on the front for Holland. And another Rabobank attacker coming now on the left of our picture. And this is this Bogart who's launched an attack?
Difficult to see. It looks as if it might still be Eric Decker trying to go out of the front again on the attack.
Well, he's certainly making a long one of this. He's trying desperately to get a little group working away together here now. And there's plenty of riders willing to chase down. It can't be long now before they shake this bunch up because these attacks are going to come so fast. The problem is the riders won't... And look at the situation now. Because of the attacks, they have split this bunch up all over the highway.
It's hard to call it a bunch right now. It's more like a chasing group. There are very few riders left in this Amstel Gold Race. And the fact that there aren't so many people out here today watching the race is because the organisation and the government have asked people to stay away because of this foot and mouth. And they've done a great job in actually being able to put the race on in a situation where over the last 15 days, Phil, we've heard so many rumours about whether it would or would not take place.
Yes, and the public have clearly heeded the warnings and they're doing the right thing here. And it is Eric Decker who has come through, looks over, This is the mixing time now, when the boys are starting to get very frisky, testing quickly the weaker ones. Bartley here looking around all over the place. Schmill goes through. They must have wiped out the breakaway. There's Fred. So we're all together now.
Well, that must have been pretty rapid indeed, because the last time check we got was around about 50 seconds. But it is all completely back together right now. There's Vinokurov, little rider from Team Telecom there. An excellent ride last week for him in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Freddie Rodriguez is there. Armstrong is there himself. It's the first chance we've really got to see Armstrong this year, although he did have an 8th place in the Semana Catalana. This is Michele Bartoli out of the front again, very aggressive.
And doing the right thing. He's on the cycle path here, which of course you can't ride on the road in normal occasions. It would be illegal for a cyclist. And Bartoli attacking now on what is a slight rise. Good place to choose. Going to keep the huge effort. The yellow flag means danger because the road narrows. It's yellow for danger in Europe, and there's why. You have to breathe in deeply. And there's a bit of a scurry here now, somewhat panic as they try to answer Bartoli's rather sharp-looking attack there.
Well, he's got a mean acceleration, Michele Bartoli, but you can see all of the time Rabobank are putting men up there just to try and keep control. This looks like Michael Bogert now coming off the front of the group. He's countered the move by Michele Bartoli, but I think he's going to have a hard call to try and ride to the finish on his own at this pace.
And he's listened to you because he's sat up to see if any little group can come and join him. Bogart knows what it's like to win the Amstel Gold Race. Bartoli also there.
On the left-hand side there with the large helmet and the grey jersey is Johan Museo, so it's good to see Museo riding so well here. It's a race that he's enjoyed in the past, and Freddie Rodriguez is not enjoying it at all because he has popped.
Yes, it's interesting to see Museo there. He didn't enjoy his ride in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, that's for sure. Now, the group has thinned out under this flurry of attacks, but there are still a lot of riders here willing to give it their best shot. And a lot of riders from Rabobank, again, launching attack after attack at the front now. They've got enough men here, too, to try and weaken this and hopefully get one away. 4 of them clear now. This is Museo bringing them round at a tremendous speed. It's an interesting move, this, by Johan Museo. I didn't expect to see him in the thick of the action in this event.
Well, he has won this event in the past. That was back in 1994 when he was really at the height of his classic campaign. He's a man, I think, who has won nearly every one of the classics except Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He was the man of the 90s for the one-day classic seasons, and I think now, after the performance in Paris-Roubaix, he must be looking to try and get himself another one-day victory. And in fact, I'd have to look back very carefully through the years, Phil, to see if there was a year when Johan Museo hadn't won a one-day classic.
Well, I can't help you on that, Paul, so you have to do it yourself. But I don't know. But he certainly has been a wonderful bike rider. I certainly know that. And a great man to talk to as well. His English isn't that great, but on the other hand, he always has interesting things to say. And now he's in second place here, still on the attack, trying to break the attention of the big field.
Eric Decker was the man launching the attack with Museo in second position. This looks like one of the big Cofidis riders coming across here, and that is more than likely going to be Chris Pearce.
It is indeed. He's a man that deserves a good success. He reads the move so well. He hasn't quite latched on yet, but this man will do one day, and it looks as though we've got an interesting man in this breakaway.
The third man in line, I think, is a rather interesting man to see riding well in the classics. That's Lance Armstrong. Something so far that Jan Ullrich has failed to do is to show in the early season classics.
But Lance is pulling quite a face there as he tried to hang on to the wheel of Johan Museo. Looked over for a little bit of assistance, slipping back from the main break, but there's 4 of them clear just now. And looking to see if anybody can join them. Sweeping descent at the speed of Museo coming down. Chris Pearce in second place, Armstrong. And they are the first 3 riders on the road. And there's the whole field is freewheeling back on. No, maybe not. Maybe this may be the start of the move.
Good move by Johan Museo. In fact, if you talk to Lance Armstrong about the men who he really respects in the sport of professional cycling, one of the men in the top 3 or 4 names he'll give you is Johan Museo. Eric Decker leading through one of these small Dutch towns very far to the front. There's Peter van Pietergem, Mercury Viatel going through there. Armstrong, very attentive ride by Armstrong right now, keeping himself right up near the front of the pack. Museo is there.
The Berg is there too, the champion. He's also a Rabobank man. Don't be fooled by his national champions jersey of Switzerland, because he is the champ. Here comes Bogert again. Looks at everybody disdainfully because somebody left the door open. Might well have been Andre Schmill there. But anyway, Bogart's going to close it down. This bunch all of a sudden has reduced rather dramatically. There's a bigger bunch even further back, but this little group here might get across.
This is quite a serious speed here as we head up through now towards the climbs. We will be coming fairly shortly, Phil, to the Kutterberg. That comes around about 27 kilometers to go to the finish. It climbs up 22%, and in the past it's a climb which has been absolutely mad with the crowd that come out to see it. This year I expect it will be almost devoid of spectators.
Well, I think you're right, because they won't be allowed to go up there. That's about 10 miles ahead as we continue on the road here, and it looks at all the damage slowly being repaired.
Christian van der
to the back there.
Christian van der Velde moving forward there as well. Michele Bartoli at the rear end of the group right now. The pace is certainly exceptionally high. This is Armstrong accelerating at the moment up one of these climbs, trying to split the group.
Well, this is the first big attack from Lance, and he's launched it in that low cadence he pedals at now. 43 kilometers to go at this point as Armstrong puts in an attack. Any takers is the big question.
Well, anybody who can respond to that is going to be pretty good. Somebody's coming hauling across the gap right now.
Well, I'm not sure. It looks like Eddie Mazzolini who's come across here from Vini Calderola.
It is in fact Eddie Mazzolini who's come across. Let's just take a look at that one more time. Armstrong riding at the front of the main field. Actually, it doesn't really look like much of an attack, Phil. He was in first position. He's just pedaling quite hard on the pedals, keeping the cadence high. But what happens is the guys behind actually basically sit up, and he continues with his efforts.
It is amazing, because we have just seen about 10 or 12 kilometers of absolute full-on attacking, everybody countering the moves, bringing everybody back together again. Lance has hit them in exactly the right moment, because there were three bunches there. They come back together, nobody willing to launch an attack because they're tired. Lance has sensed that, and he might have chosen well. And Mazzolini somewhere has found his legs here to get across to Lance Armstrong. Now, Mazzolini and Lance Armstrong's cycling reputations are vastly different, and yet Mazzolini's gone for Lance and joined him.
Well, the important thing when a big star like Lance Armstrong attacks is to be on the wheel as quickly as possible, because if you don't, you will never make the distance up again. Armstrong on a titanium bicycle there. He's in fact just put his earpiece in to get into communication with his team manager, Johan Brunel, from behind. But the big losers right now, Phil, are Rabobank. They're going to be put on the defensive again and have to do a lot of work on the front of the main field, because you dare not let a man like Armstrong get too much of an advantage.
Well, there is the man we've waited a long time to see him in our television pictures. At this stage of this season, we haven't seen him at all in 2001, but he's there now, and he's put in an excellent attack, and Mazzolini's ready. Well, Mazzolini's only ever won 2 races, both of those last year, a stage of the Tour of Romandy in Switzerland, and also a stage of the Tour of Switzerland itself. He is, in fact, an Italian.
Well, Van Petegem in this next group on the road, as is Schmiel. Amazing to see Schmiel in the second group, because he's been involved in an awful lot of attacks, and Eric Decker pulls himself back up. And in fact, notice that Michael Bogard there just dropped off the back of the group there to pace his men into the group as well. So they're playing a very tactical game today, our Rabobank, Phil. Now they've got 2 men in this group, but they never should have gotten caught out by that move by Lance Armstrong.
No, they've got 3 men, Paul. There's Bogart, as you say. There's 3 riders up in this group for Rabobank, and now they've got to make a quick decision, because gone in the distance are these 2 riders. No time checks coming yet, but they're quite clearly over half a minute ahead, I would say, of the field. And Armstrong was the man who caused the attack, and Mazzolini was the man who spotted it, and the others let him go.
This caused that group behind to split again. That's a very select group of riders on Moto 2 chasing him down, and you can see as they wind their way down that descent just after Lance Armstrong, they can't be very much more than about 25 seconds behind right now. And Eddie Mazzolini has decided he's going to come to the front and work with the man who's been the champion of the Tour de France for the last 2 years. Armstrong, though, looks like a man possessed today. He's got incredible pedaling action, keeping that cadence of his very high indeed, pushing the pace. This is for him a very important test, and the way Armstrong rides nowadays, Phil, he chooses certain objectives throughout the season, but when he does come to race, he races full on.
He likes to test himself. His thoughts not winning of Amstel Gold, but winning the Tour de France. That's his main singular objective. Here is Eric Decker, who won 3 stages of the race last year when Lance won the big race itself. And Eric now having to do a lot of work here. A bit slow to get onto the group he was, but on the group he now is. Also in this group is Johan Museo, Andre Schmiel, Chris Piers is there, Christian van der Velde it is. This is the group now which is assembling a very select chase group, and at the back there Van der Velde is going to remain a passenger. He's going to help no one.
In this group as well, I caught a glimpse of Davide Rebellin, a good favourite for a circuit like this, especially with the fact that there are a couple of climbs within the last 10 kilometres. Armstrong coming up alongside Eddie Mazzolini, who will have given him a word of encouragement there, saying, well, come on, let's work together. We've got a chance here to build up a large advantage. Armstrong nowadays, having spent a long time in Europe, fairly conversant in French and in Italian as well as Spanish, which he obviously uses quite a bit racing down there in Texas.
Mazzolini taking a look over his shoulder. He better not lose the concentration, because he needs that back wheel of Armstrong, who is driving again up a climb here with all of his power, pedaling a low gear and just sitting there with great pedaling. The rainbow jersey sleeve edges there as a former world champion. That is his right. And the riders here in this group are using this little climb of the Lourdeberg to try and split the field, and this might be a decisive chase, and Museo has missed the split.
So they're trying to nail back that leading group of riders, which contains Decker and Bogard. All kinds of urgency in this group behind. There's Bortolami in 4th position there. You can see the big, strong style of him rolling about on the bike. Well, a lot of riders at the back of that group in difficulty. This is Rebellin moving off the front, but they're about to get caught, I think, Phil, by a larger group of around about 20 riders or so.
Yeah, I think half the riders dropped earlier have just come on that climb, in fact. And we have a much bigger bunch here now as David Rebellin sets the pace briefly, drops away off the back. So this is going to become a much more concentrated main field now. But still, the 2 riders are clear at the front.
Decker now put into the role of defender, trying to pull the team back up to the front. They'll be working as hard as they can, but I think for Van der Velde, it's boom, boom, and out go the lights. It wasn't Van der Velde, actually.
No, it's George Hincapie, Paul. He's done a lot of work today, let's be fair. He has set this up today. It's becoming evident now for a late attack by Armstrong. George out in front for a long, long way today. There's nothing left now. His job done. Time to get ready for a shower and hope that his team captain can finish it off. He is now in the breakaway with Eddie Mazzolini, and the main field, well, what's left of the main field, showing signs of stress. An attack now by Zeberg.
Well, Van Bon, another rider going out of the back of this group because of the pressure on the front of the main field by the Rabobank team, and of course by Davide Rebellin in the black jersey there with the yellow sleeves. He's very much present at the front of this pack. He's waiting for a new group to go forward. In 3rd position there, we just caught a sign there of Michael Bogard. This is another one of the unnamed climbs in this part of the Amstel Gold Race. Armstrong absolutely flying today. Obviously, Phil, his first major rendezvous of the day, and I'd have to say for the moment, it's 10 out of 10.
He attacks everything with such enthusiasm. It's all part of the big plan to look for the fitness to give him the Tour de France. You remember when he won the Tour de France first time? This was the race he chose, and he was beaten to the victory by Bogart. And now again we are seeing an attack by Rabobank once more. And this is Decker again, isn't it?
Decker again coming off the front, trying to take the pressure off his teammates here. It's a big question to try and ride across a gap, especially when a man like Lance Armstrong is absolutely hammering at the front. He doesn't look super good today, Eric Decker. He seems to be rolling about on the bars just a little bit. He was oh so close a couple of weeks ago to winning the Tour of Flanders. He came into the photo finish there, just a late burst. If he'd judged his sprint just a little bit better, he may well have been first over the line. But in the photo finish, the result on that day went to Gianluca Bortolami. But he's a courageous bike rider, Phil, and very much changed this season.
Well, he's setting himself a time trial now, and he's still not impossible to catch the leaders. The gap is not that big just yet. Decker was the time trial champion, in fact, of the Netherlands in 1996, so he's a good lone rider. Let's see if he can get across. There's the 2 leaders on the left. Round the right-hand bend now for Eric Decker. It's not so long ago, in fact, that the 2 leaders went through there. He's committed now. He's done something nobody else has been able to do for these past few kilometres. He's got away. He gave it 100% on that hill. He hurt himself, but I think that was the only way to shake the limpets in the back group.
Well, he looks very low in the saddle right now, but I tell you one thing, the movement that he's coming out with are very useful. He's pushing the pace very high indeed, touching 50 kilometres an hour. He has got a pursuit, in fact, in front of him right now to try and catch these 2 riders. Armstrong, though, is absolutely flying. Eddie Mazzolini's having a hard time staying with the Texan.
Just look at the face here and the concentration of Lance Armstrong. He always seems to be riding a short frame, Lance, but he gets a lot of power through that body. And the gap we're hearing now is only 20 seconds. So, in fact, Decker is coming up. But that looks a bit more than 20 seconds. Maybe not. It's hard to tell with our cameras here. But right round that top bend are the two leaders. Back to the main chase, and that's Michele Bartoli here. He's got himself a Rabobank police escort now because they're slowing off the main field. They don't want to chase it now. Clearly, they wanted Decker to make the move.
It's strange that they're giving their advantage over to Decker because Decker's done a lot of work in this group so far, Phil. I would have thought the man to come out of the pack should have been Michael Bogard. He's the man who took the victory here a couple of years ago, just ahead of Lance Armstrong. He is taking a lot of risks. The last time we saw him go round one of those corners, though, I thought he was going to cook it because he really went round there at full speed, hardly touching the brakes at all. His position right now does not look brilliant at all, but it seems to be working for him. Ooh. He's 24 seconds behind the Cop group, the leading group of riders, which is Armstrong and Mazzolini, and it would be more interesting, I think, to see just how far behind the main field were.
And here they are up ahead, a little bit more than we thought, but he is absolutely flying. You've got an idea from the camera work there just how fast Decker is going. And the back of the field now, it looks as though Bartoli is getting a bit upset with the escort of Rabobank. He's trying to shake something out of this chase group. They've got to do it fairly quickly. We're somewhere in the region of 25 miles still to go to the finish in Maastricht. Decker has taken flight. There are two leaders up the road, and Bartoli will sense now they've got to reshape this race, otherwise he's going to run away.
Well, he's absolutely torching it right now. He's giving it everything he's got. He will be able to see roughly where these two riders are because of the fact that the helicopter covering the race television will also be over the front of these two leaders, so he can judge his effort, and he will know this course absolutely perfectly. These men are from this area of Holland. They want to win this bike race, and they know what the corners are like, and you can pick up an awful lot of time in the corners. But I'd have to say Armstrong is riding beautifully today. Michele Bartoli, he's a prisoner right now in the main field, and he won't be happy with that. He will be marked everywhere he goes, and it seems that having come from the great Mappé Armada today, Phil, he's very much isolated.
Well, the speed of this man is often frightening. When he does turn on the style, he tears a peloton to shreds, and he's done it again here. But he's pulling away, unfortunately, at least two of the Rabobank team, and they're not going to be anything but passengers. And look in the distance, you can see just through the trees there the following cars of the two leaders. So Decker here now is probably no more than 14, 15 seconds. He has them in his sights. That's a fine piece of riding. He's got to catch them now.
Well, Mazzolini takes up the chase on the front of the main field, and there's a nasty little corner here. This part of Holland is all raced on small roads. They're very tricky roads as well as they go round this corner. You've got to be alert going round these corners. Armstrong in second place, and there's the distance between them. That will be good news for Eric Decker. He's doing a storming ride here, Phil, actually getting across, and he can't be very much more than 15 seconds in arrears now. No. He could do with a couple more corners, and he just might make it.
He's inspired. He's out of the saddle as soon as he's out of the bend now. And if you look up the road, you can see them, and so can Eric. Eric is now feeling confident. Just in front of that policeman, we've got the two leaders.
Well, he's going to give it everything on this descent right now, and he will have the advantage of seeing them in front of him, and he will use that as a bait, as a carrot, like a carrot in front of a donkey. He will go for it, and slowly he will eat into their advantage. There are the two men leading the bike race on the left-hand side, and Eric Decker, the one chaser, on the right. The main field are losing a little bit of ground at the moment, but that's because of the tactical maneuvering going on between the Rabobank riders and Michele Bartoli.
Well, it's a long time since we've seen an Amstel Gold Race which has become a veritable pursuit across the Dutch countryside. Lance has taken a very early move here, more than 25 miles from the finish. He was clearly content to go alone. I bet he's grateful that Mazzolini decided to chase him down because it's an extra bit of help. But look at this now. Bogart also in a little bit of trouble here. He's having to work back up to the split caused by Bartoli. He didn't go with the original move.
Well, if you're not on the wheel or in the shelter from the wind here, it is very difficult on these kind of roads. He's having to dig quite deep there to make sure he stays in contact. If he doesn't stay in contact, you get a mouthful from the team manager in the evening. Andre Schmiel is the man right in front of him. The man on the front of this group setting all of the terrible pace is in fact Michele Bartoli.
So Bartoli, the man from Italy, doing the work, and all that's come on the back end is more trouble for him in the form of the Rabobank team leader, Michael Bogart, who's having the best start of the season I think he's ever had.
Also in this group, you can see the pale blue shorts of the Mercury VTL rider, Peter van Petegem. After a good start to the season, he in fact had a lot of bad luck and was put on a course of antibiotics before his two favourite races, Tour of Flanders. Oh, what's happening here?
Well, where has Schmill gone? He completely misread the corner. He must have been distracted. I will try and have a look at that again, because he came off that bend and made no attempt to go round the corner. He had to have been distracted. What was he doing? And here comes the chase group now. Wait for it. Look at this.
Well, that's a crazy thing to happen there. I can't understand for the life of me what happened to Andre Schmill there. I think you're right. He was a little bit distracted, not paying attention. A very fast corner came up on him. And watch it again here. He just seems to go straight on into the corner. A bit of panic there. The other two guys almost followed him. He jumped off the machine and stayed upright. Pretty impressive result there.
With this then, the peloton comes round the corner. One of the Mercatoni Una riders takes to the paving and leave him struggling in the centre. Well, it's all action today in the Amstel Gold, and now on the horizon we've gone back up to Decker, and during that little bit of distraction, Decker has continued to make inroads. What would that be, Paul? 12 to 15 seconds, absolute tops.
Not very much more than that. He's doing a great ride right now. He's being pushed on by, I suppose, with all of the hopes of Holland on his shoulders right now, because although Lance Armstrong is very popular here in Holland, he is also not a Dutchman, and they would certainly want to have a Dutchman win. This is Escartine at the back, crabbing it all over the machine of his, trying to stay in contact. We very rarely see Fernando Escartine in a classic at this time of the year, but because of the fact that he's on the new Team Coast, he's being brought up here to ride the Amstel Gold Race. Schmiel doesn't seem to have any problems at all there in his red Lotto jersey, but he is now at the back of the third group on the road.
Puffing and blowing a bit and rather kicking himself because he's been dispatched from the leaders to this group, and that was a very bad mistake by Andre Schmiel. His best ever finish in the Amstel Gold is a few years ago now. He finished 6th, and as you know, he's been a great classic winner as well. Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, and he holds the fastest classic record, by the way, for a victory, highest average speed in Paris Tours.
He's a great bike rider, very courageous, and a fantastic performance by him a couple of weeks ago. And this man today is putting in his performance. Second in the Tour of Flanders just 2 weeks ago, and now looking at riding onto the tail of Lance Armstrong. Now, if he hooks up forces with Armstrong, this could be very serious for all the other contenders, because Armstrong, in my opinion, is absolutely flying today. And if Decker can get across the gap, as you see him going round that corner at 31 kilometers to go, he's not taking any prisoners at all. And shortly he will be on the tail of Armstrong. We will have two very strong men at the front, with the aid of Eddie Mazzolini, who I would think seems to be the weakest of the three.
So just under 20 miles to go. Peter van Petegem here, number 107. He's got himself into the chase group. The Mercury VTL boys will be happy about that. The champion of Italy, Bartoli, still continues to drive on, searching for another win after he started the season so well in Het Volk with a surprise sprint victory in that from the leading bunch. But although he works hard, he is not clicking like he has done in the past yet.
Michael Burgard on the back. He won't contribute at all to the pacemaking here, because he'll be quite happy with the situation. He will expect number 41 there, Michele Bartoli, to do the majority of the work to try and pull this race back together. He's got a great position, Michael Burgard, on his machine there, very comfortable. He looks at ease on his machine, even though a few moments ago he was in serious difficulty.
A little bit of cloud creeping in now, but there's no rain forecast today. The temperature is very pleasant here in Holland, as Eric Decker is about to turn up the temperature to make it very hot for the two riders up front. He is finally closing the gap. This has been a real tough chase for him, and he appears to have been flying over the road, so it just tells you how quick Lance Armstrong is going at the front. And I think I'm right in saying Lance Armstrong, because Mazzolini doesn't seem that willing or able to do long turns with Lance at the front.
Well, it's been a very long chase here for this man, and he still hasn't nailed down the last few yards, and he won't give up at all until he gets right into the slipstream of the two leaders. Armstrong will now know that Eric Decker is about to make the junction, and we'll see just exactly what Decker does when he gets there. I would think he'll sit on the back for 100 meters or so and try and catch a breather.
We now have three men in the lead. We're inside 29 kilometers to go. Top group, the head group, Decker, Armstrong, Mazzolini. Now, will Armstrong be pleased or sad? Because surely an extra pair of legs at this stage might be welcome.
I think it will be welcome, and he'll know the fact that, in fact, there seems to be a problem here at the back. Well, in fact, no, there isn't a problem here. What's happening is he's touching the push-to-talk button to have a quick word with his team manager at the back. This is Michael Bogard. He'll be talking to Theo de Roy, letting him know what his form is like at the moment. And Theo de Roy will be telling him that Eric Decker at the moment has just made contact. Because nowadays, with all of this communication, which I know you hate, Phil, a lot of the team managers actually have televisions in the cars, and they can see the same live pictures as we see and understand how the race is unfolding and then help decide the tactics on the road.
I don't know, Paul. We'll be using mechanical men next, and we won't bother with human beings on bikes, but there we are. I like riders to think for themselves, and let's see a great bike race. And right now we're looking at a very good bike race here. 3 top riders together at the front. Perhaps the odd man out very slightly, Eddie Mazzolini. Lance Armstrong, having seen the arrival now of Eric Decker, checking over there, slipping to the back to see if anybody else is slipping up in the shadows, but they're not coming at the moment. Bartley would like to have a say in it, but they can't get rid of the Rabobank shadows. Takes a good look at Eric Decker. Decker, of course, can speak English, so they can converse.
Coming up now to the Kutterberg in not very much more than a couple of kilometers. 28 kilometers covered as they go here through Skin op Heule. And Eric Decker took a bit of a breather, but I think now he will be quite content to work with Armstrong. This 6-man chasing group at the back has 2 riders from Rabobank, and I think Michele Bartel has decided to turn off the pressure just a little bit. The larger rider right in front of him is Johan Museo, and just swinging off the front for Mercury Viatel, in fact, is Peter van Petegem. I get a feeling here, Phil, as we see Lotz there in 3rd position, that Bogard actually wants to encourage the chase here because he doesn't have confidence in the position of Eric Decker in the front.
Well, I'm sure that Bogard is the undisputed leader of the team, and they sent Decker up there to try and do the spoiling tactics now and then wait for the arrival of Michael here, because Michael has had such a great start to the season. He's got the best form of his life. It might be that there's still time yet, because we still have the climb to come, as you know, of the Kuttenberg, not very far away now, and then we've got the climb to the Kauberg when we come out of Valkenberg shortly. All of these are going to hurt the riders up front, and there's only 3 of them, but they've reduced that chase group now to just that handful of riders.
It's pretty impressive to see in a race like this, when you remember just last week there were so many riders left in at the end of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Today has been a very difficult race, and I think the organisation will probably rethink their little incursion into Belgium that they used to have, because I think the race this way around has been a lot harder. The Kuttenberg now 22%. Oops.
That is rather steep, and right onto the front goes Lance Armstrong here. It's hardly an alpine climb, but it is very steep. Normally packed with people, so many so we can hardly see the road. Today emptied out because of the problems in the farmlands. And now Armstrong, and more importantly Decker, has no one to cheer him from Holland on this climb. It is a lonely road up, and Armstrong concentrating hard here and just rocking and rolling like we've seen him do so many times over the years. Mazzolini gritting his teeth, hanging on the back of Eric Decker. Now, if Eric's had a hard chase for him, he obviously has had a hard chase, he's going to have to grit his teeth and hold on. But look, it could be here that Mazzolini is cracked first.
Well, Mazzolini in serious difficulty, and that's not surprising when you look at the stature of the 2 men in front of him. Armstrong, you saw that quick glance over his shoulder. He wanted to see the position of the Italian, and I think they've done it right now, because this climb is unbelievably steep at 22%. Armstrong is dancing on the pedals right now, and you can see Decker, not normally very much at home on the short climbs here, is just knowing what he has to do. He has to do one thing here, Phil. He has to stay on the wheel of Armstrong, but on the same climb is the chasing group of 6.
Johan Museo at the back too seems to be handling it quite well at the moment. He's heading up over the ridge there where they've just dropped Mazzolini at the front. Decker has ridden back up. He hasn't come out of the saddle yet, Eric Decker. Armstrong likes to keep a rhythm going. Decker has just sat there using his pure body weight to push those big legs around, and I think he's tamed Armstrong. He's come up. Armstrong is happy to take his wheel. Armstrong checking there where Mazzolini is. He's gone, I'm afraid. Eddie Mazzolini has lost his position and will shortly be picked up by this group perhaps, but here they are, still Museo on the back. Other rider is Lotz and Michael Bogard. Sorry, I was thinking of Michael Bogart, the two Rabobank riders, and Bartley, yeah.
Well, it doesn't seem that they're actually giving it full stick up this climb at the moment. Bogart is setting the tempo at the front, but he's not doing that much damage on the rest. Looking at the man at the back here, Johan Museo, the funny thing is, Phil, he hasn't had a victory since Paris-Roubaix of last year, but he is still in the chance for the win here today with some of the top riders in the world. And when you think of all his body's been through with the accidents he's been submitted to, it is quite remarkable to see him looking so competitive.
Such a shrewd operator is Museo. He's got the strength, and when he hasn't got the strength, he's got the brain. And at the moment, it's Bartley who's in a bit of trouble here as Van Petegem drives over the top with Michael Bogart. Lotz is slipped a little bit at the back with Museo and Michael Bartley. Now they're coming back over the top. Yes, I think they are. They're going to be 5 again very shortly. These are the two leaders now, and betwixt both we have Eddie Mazzolini.
Well, that climb didn't really seem to make Eric Decker suffer too much, and immediately they got over the summit. He was very prepared to share the pacemaking with Lance Armstrong. And you see how he's riding over to the left-hand side of the road there and forcing Armstrong to shelter on the left. This is Davide Rebellin coming forward here. We've got Chris Peers, Marcus Zuberg going through there as well, and this is the remnants of the rest of the group.
This is indeed the remnants of the rest of the group, and it looks like Christian van der Velde having a little good time there in the group. And is that Wilfred Peters gone through as well?
And Scotty Sunderland riding for the new crack team from the Northern Territories.
Yes, Scott Sunderland, another man who's come back from a near-death crash to become a great bike rider again.
And strangely enough, that near-death crash was in this bike race as well. He was knocked off by his former team manager, Case Preem. And in fact, I think he won his court case against Case Preem this year for damages in that crash when he insinuated that Case Preem was driving dangerously, and the court agreed with him on this occasion.
Now from the helicopter, two men riding in the shadow of each other at the moment. Eric Decker, who crossed the gap to replace Eddie Mazzolini, and Lance Armstrong all of a sudden is in the big time again now. He has showed us he has done everything right so far this season in his preparation for the Tour de France, because after this race is over, I think we'll see him disappear for a few weeks while he goes off and has a look at the roots of the Tour de France.
Well, this is a race that has smiled on Tour de France winners before, as well as we get the confirmation of the Cop group to the Achtervolkers at 1:06, the leading group to the chasing group. In fact, Bjarne Riis, the former winner of the Tour de France, took a victory here in the Amstel Gold Race as well. And if I cast my mind back to the 90s, in fact, Miguel Indurain always used to come up to this race as well in the beginning of his preparation for the Tour de France.
And it's always been a tough race. I've watched this race for many. In fact, my first race I saw for was 1968 in Amstel Gold, and of course in those days it was the definite territory of Jan Roos, the brilliant Dutch sprinter, who kept on winning this race. But now we're seeing a much more active race at the front, and this is the group which is chasing now. Museo having a well-earned drink, and he's taking it from his mate Peter Van Petegem, who's on the new Mercury Viatel team for the United States. They desperately need a good result right now. They've been getting so much bad luck, but they've got their man in here today. This actually is a very good ride for Van Petegem, because this is a tough course for him.
Well, he had a good start to the season, really, by taking out Brussels-Kern just after the Het Volk race in March. But then when he went through, Phil, to the 3 days of Le Panne, he caught a bronchial infection, and that's the worst possible time to do it before you go in to the following rally of classics: Tour of Flanders, Ghent-Wevelgem, Paris-Roubaix, the classics where really Peter Van Petegem is much more at home. But it's good to see that he seems to have bounced back from that, and I'm sure that later in the season he will come up with a few more good wins for Mercury Viatel. Armstrong there, you see, just looking over his shoulder. The great thing about the Amstel Gold Race is on these open roads and open fields, you can look back and just guess what your advantage is over the main field. And for Armstrong right now, it is over the 1 minute mark.
And that'll do nicely, but it's not a lot, you know, if things go wrong, so you've got to keep pushing on, hoping for bigger gains. Decker here content because he knows he's got the Rabobank boys a lot in that chasing group, along with his team captain Bogart. So if it all goes wrong up here for him, he's hoping Bogart will finish it off. And Lance knows all about Bogart because he was beaten by him a couple of years ago in this race.
These guys need to watch out right now their tactics, because having a man like Johan Museo along for the ride is a very dangerous thing to do, because Museo is the master tactician when it comes to the classics. The oldest rider in the group here at the moment. He knows what his chances are, and he will know just exactly how to put himself into the right position to outwit the young foxes like Michael Bogert.
And this is Moto 3, our cameraman catching up with the tail of what will be the third bunch on the road now. Andre Schmill sitting at the back. As we join this little group here, one of the riders from Deutsche Telekom, Wilfried Peters, is here. And I think Christian van der Velde is in there too.
Well, he'll be very interested on the performance of this man at the front. And I tell you what, it looks as if Eric Decker's starting to suffer a little bit now, Phil, as we go through 24 kilometres to go to the finish. He keeps shaking his legs just to get the lactic acid out of them and keep them supple, while at the back of the group, no work being done at all by Michael Bogard. And I wonder what the team discussions are in the team car of Theo de Roy just now.
Well, I don't really know how to deal with this now, because Decker seems to be the man on form, and he's reached Armstrong. It's a question of how good Armstrong is. And again, they're fighting their way back through into this lead group. There's about 4 or 5 riders just hitched up here now. This is beginning to look a little bit different again.
Another Rabobank rider recovering there. Rabobank having an excellent ride here with the number of riders they've got in. They've got one man in the breakaway situation and a great reserve here in this group as well, because Michael Bogard is certainly going to be in with a chance of taking out victory. This is the third group on the road at the moment, being led by Andre Schmill after that pretty dramatic exit from the road he took about 20 kilometers ago. Wilfried Peters, the big animator of Paris-Roubaix, going through there. Gianluca Bortolami, the winner of Tour of Flanders. Martin Dimbacher. Looks like Rolf Sorensen going through for the new CSC online team. Christian van der Velde moving through there right now. And Fernando Escartin. Pretty amazing to see him riding so close to the front. And there's Scotty Sunderland.
That's a great ride by Scott. I'm glad to see him up here. He's totally recovered now. I was with him at the start of the year in Australia, and unable to take part in the event he was really looking forward to, the Australian National Championships. Developed all the flu symptoms just before and couldn't get to the start. That was really sad, because until then things have been going rather good. Anyway, back up with 2 other men where things are going rather good at the moment, as Lance Armstrong willing to take the race through. Decker jumps on his back wheel. These two working extremely well together. Now, wouldn't it be ironic if we get down to the finish again with Armstrong having to contend with another Rabobank rider, as he did 2 years ago in the case of Michael Bogart?
Well, let's hope if that is the situation, we don't have the situation of Bogart Armstrong of a couple of years ago, when in fact Bogart just sat on Armstrong for the last 10 kilometers or so and just beat him in the photo finish. I think Armstrong will be thinking about that very closely over the next few kilometers, where in this group, Phil, it seems as if the impetus has gone out now, and obviously the order from Rabobank is to sit on, to not chase down Eric Decker, because at the moment they do have a 50-50 chance of winning. But the way Armstrong is riding, I would think the advantage is certainly going over to the Texan, because his pedaling action right now at 23 kilometers to the finish is absolutely fantastic.
So Decker, and he has been a powerhouse today, because we saw him working unselfishly.